What is up guys, Fire here, and today we're looking at patch 5.2. Now I'm going to do this a little bit differently to how I normally do it, so we're going to be looking at the big must-know changes first, and then we're going to go into all the other changes that are still important but just don't impact the game as much. So there are 4 really big changes this patch, and that's going to be the removal of DFG, the Tristana semi-rework, the jungle items, and the shift in the mid lane meta, which is kind of a lot of changes rolled into one. So let's start with the removal of DFG, and it is a hit to assassins, there's not really any way around that, but honestly it was kind of a luxury item on most champions. It was if I get ahead then I can one-shot people with this, but if I get behind I don't really need it to still be useful. I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact because most champions function without it, except a few. Like if you're a Katarina main then you are really sad with the removal of this. The biggest problem really is that when you play these kind of off meta champions like AP Malphite, AP Tristana, they're the ones that will build Deathfire to one-shot people and just have a lot of fun with it, and you can't really do that anymore. Plus, like 90% of you guys will probably even forget to use it when you have it on your active bar, so you're not really gonna miss it. Okay, so the next thing is a Tristana rework, and I'll call it a rework because it was changed, like her E is different, but honestly it's only her E that's really changed that much. The important thing to know here though is that her stats have actually been nerfed quite hard. I mean, her attack speed growth stats, so attack speed per level is down, her base armor is down, base health is down, range per level is down. A lot of her base stats have been nerfed, like at level 18 you'll have 671 range now I think, instead of a 703, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you will feel it in game. With any rework comes everyone spamming the champion, right? Because it's new, it's fun, and she'll probably get a buff later depending on how strong her E is. So her E in theory looks like a lot of damage early, but then it becomes more useless as the game goes on. I played her a little bit today and on the PBE, and the cool thing was that she actually does so much damage level 1 and 2 when you jump on someone with your E or when you just E someone in auto attack. So actually if you play super aggro in the early levels you can get a lead and then snowball into this late game monster. Right, so possibly the biggest change this patch is for the jungle items. So they've increased the gold of the first upgrade by 100 gold. Now 100 gold doesn't sound like a lot, but it completely screws up the current jungle routes, and 100 gold like 4 minutes into the game is actually a lot of gold. It's going to hurt your early clearing ganking potential because normally you would do these 3 camps and then go back, you'd get the upgrade and a couple of potions, get your last buff and then gank. Now you can't really do that. You either have to farm for longer or you have to go back twice to get your upgrade and then you can start ganking. The thing I expect to see more of is more of these cheeky level 2 ganks, because you could do your 3 camps to start with and then you won't have enough gold to get the upgrade, so you could go to a lane, try and get a cheeky first blood and then go back and buy it. The biggest problem is that after those 3 camps you're not really healthy enough to continue, but if you base you can't really afford anything except potions, and it just makes the early jungle really messy. Junglers right now have a huge impact in the game, and this is just going to tone down the early aggression, but when we get kind of past the 5-6 minute mark you'll still see junglers having a big impact. The final big change to talk about is really the shift in the mid lane meta, and this is a culmination of a lot of different changes, so I'm not going to go too in depth right now because there are lots of different things that contribute to this. Assassins have been hit really hard this patch. The only one who's still top tier is probably Zed, which means that more poke champions are going to come back into the meta. Assassins are the way to kill poke because obviously the poke just wants to sit back and whittle you down, whereas the assassin just dives in first and doesn't let you actually do that. Xerath, Ziggs, Orianna, Lux should be really strong in this patch, and that's one of the biggest changes that you're actually going to experience in your games. So now we're going to move on to the other changes, and the first up is Ahri. So they've changed her spells around a little bit, and the biggest thing really is the removal of the damage amplification on her E, which means that if you hit your E now you don't do bonus damage to that target. The other cool thing, or the other change, is that her Q will now gain you a massive movement speed boost while her orb is traveling, and it's going to decay over time, but it means that if you're chasing someone or trying to escape, you can really kite around even more. They are reducing the damage on her W as well, but it should kind of flow more, I think, with your auto attacks, which is what I've got from the patch notes. Overall, these are nerfs to Ahri's damage, but if we think about it actually in game, how many times have you been killed by an Ahri and she's fluffed and just missed her charm anyway? I mean, recently we played against a lot of Ahri because she's been so strong, and I actually die a lot mid or just in the jungle or as an AD, and I dodge that charm. She just still has a ton of damage, so it's not going to be as big a setback as people think, but it is definitely a nerf. These Akali changes are actually a pretty big nerf, and it's kind of deserved because she's just so ridiculous right now. The amount of times that I've got fed bot lane and the enemy Akali is fed as well, or just kind of farmed, and she comes down and kills me before I can do anything, it's just ridiculous. It tones her down a little bit, but the Gunblade buff is actually going to help her as well because it will give her some power back. So it's not maybe a must ban anymore for Akali, but she's still going to be okay and strong if you're actually good with the champion. This Ahri change is pretty gimmicky and it's not really going to make much difference, but the reason I want to highlight it is because she is such a good support right now. The changes aren't going to make much difference to that, but I just wanted to point it out and try and encourage you guys to play her a little bit. I can't believe I actually just said that because I hate playing against Ahri as an AD carry because she's so strong, but her base damage is really high, she has a stun, really good lane pressure as well, so if you're trying to climb in low elo, Ahri is a really good support pick to kill the opposing AD over and over and just snowball the game in your advantage. So Cassio has actually always had problems with her mana, and it's something that you won't really appreciate unless you play her, but this is actually going to hurt her lane phase more than it's going to hurt her late game. You could before use your E to last hit if you were going to miss it or just for harass and get some lane pressure, but now it's going to make you go out of mana really quickly. Late game you're probably going to have a blue buff on you permanently before you fight, or at least you should because she has so many mana issues, and it's going to kind of make a tier I think core on her now, even maybe more mana regen than that, some mana potions to actually survive because she is really mana hungry after this. I don't really know how much I can go into this Fizz change because they've really shifted his damage around, but honestly they've just lowered it a lot. Your W is now more damage on the activation, you have the 20% damage amplification on your ult, and the Q damage is just way down. Pre-6 you're not really going to have much lane pressure or fight potential or anything like that, and honestly with the rise of these kind of pokey champions who can actually zone Fizz out of farm in lane, the way you used to beat them before was you'd all in them and you'd kill them. Like if you're against a Xerath, you just all in him and kill him and he can't obviously poke you when he's dead. The problem now is though, he won't have that much damage until he gets level 6, and so these champions are going to bully you and punish you and set you really far behind before you reach that point. Okay, so let's move on to Nidalee, and this might not look like too much, but for any of you Nidalee players, you're actually going to love this change. The first thing is that jungle Nidalee is now buffed a little bit, and it was actually kind of secretly, not overpowered, but secretly strong at least anyway. But it also gives you better juke, so you can Q to a jungle creep now, and you can leap over with your hunted jump, your empowered jump, which gives you even more range. So it actually just makes you a really kind of slippery, even more slippery, as if Nidalee actually needed that. This is actually one a lot of people have asked me about because Rek'Sai is slowly getting nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, and I think this one is probably the one that takes him out of the top 5. His base damage took a giant hit this patch. I mean, 2 abilities getting their base damage reduced really does hurt, but it still means that if you build damage, you're still going to do damage on him because it hasn't affected his scaling at all. He's not really a great tank, he doesn't have much in his kit that makes him a good tanker or anything like that, not like Jarvan who can actually zone people out of the fight, and he doesn't really kill people anymore either if he builds tank. The reason you're going to pick Rek'Sai now is for his early pressure, his early ganking, which these base damage won't actually mean too much, and also his early pressure with his ultimate because he can be anywhere on the map. The problem is that he already kind of fell off in mid game and in team fights, and that's going to happen even harder now. So the last change is to Zed, and it's actually not going to hurt him too much. You might lose one auto in an all-in with your death mark, but even then that should be enough to kill someone, honestly. It doesn't stop his lane control or his roaming or his split push being so good, so I think honestly he is one of the top mid laners right now. There are a lot of random changes with items, just small little tweaks and stuff, but there are 2 that I'm going to go over. The first one is actually pretty cool, especially for top laners and for junglers as well, and that's now that you can have a giant spell and build it from a ruby crystal. This doesn't actually seem like a huge change, but it's going to be good because it means you can base earlier and pick it up for a little bit of extra stats, I guess, and you don't just have to save this huge 1000 gold for a giant spell. The final item change worth mentioning is the Gunblade, and it's buffed a little to help assassins like Katarina and Akali. If you're a Katarina player and you haven't tried Gunblade, then I recommend you do because it's actually pretty strong. The thing is, I don't really think you buy this on many people apart from like Katarina and Akali, as I said, and it's still not as good as the DFG was for Katarina, and it doesn't make up for the Akali nerfs either, but it does go some way to kind of nurse them so they're still viable. So that wraps up my 5.2 video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think about the new format and if you like it. I think this is probably better for the majority of people, but let me know anyway. I'm going to be doing my top 5 videos for 5.2 at the end of this week, beginning of next week now. So I'll have all 4 of those videos out for you guys pretty soon, but that's all for this time, so I'll catch you next time.